what are some ways that intergenerational trauma shows up in our lives, right? Because sometimes we refer to in our generations ago, it was war, it was famine, or slavery, like Celia mentioned, like this large scale stuff that we can label as, oh, that was big, right? But how can we see that we are connected to a war, that we are connected to slavery, that we are connected to famine, that we are connected to stories of deep poverty? How can we see that those are still having impact in our lives? Nir, do you want to go first this time?
Sure. Well, in a funny way, we don't even need to know the signs. It's always there. In the smallest thing, someone is always late. Nothing they do changed that. They're always late. You go back into the history, you see that their grandparents were late for the trains to Auschwitz. They survived, now they're late. It makes sense. You go into romantic relationships and you notice the dynamics between people, and you notice that, okay, psychology already tells us that I married my mom and she married her father in some way, but actually sometimes I married my great-grandmother and not my mom, and this also affects. I had a session a while ago with a friend who was suffering from really bad back pain. And she tried everything other than constellations. And we did a constellation, which went to her personal, her intergenerational trauma. I won't go into the details, but after 2 weeks of not being able to sit or stand or walk, after half an hour, she could do all that. And after a day, she was like, oh, yeah, I did have a back pain. And it's just that so often when we try to solve things and it doesn't work, the pain continues, the difficulty continues, the loneliness continues, the anxiety continues. It's because a very important part is not here, it's back there. You should go back there, do something, come back.
Thank you. Yes, it's sometimes as simple as that, right? Yeah.
Sometimes it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Vilja, would you like to go next?
Yeah, quite often it could be some type of narratives or some type of embodiment, so which I can get from someone from my family. And for example, one time I worked with a very talented woman, and she had some issues around money, and we started to explore these issues, and we found a terrible fear about money. So it's really dangerous to be wealthy or good enough with money. And at that moment when we found that, say, oh shit, yeah, really, it was a story in my family that it was really dangerous. Or like, for example, a lot of women in Russia, we have, in fact, a lot of sexual violence historically here. And a lot of women, when they enter to their apartment building and go to the lift, they take the key like this. So to be able to to fight. And it's like, I do the same. I was sure that I'm the only crazy person and I have my personal story around this, but a lot of young girls do the same. How we do, why we do it, how we know it. And it's a lot of habits, it's a lot of thoughts, it's a lot of beliefs, it's a lot of traditions. And they're not about real life or personal story. And we can find it, we can see it, and we learn to do like to think like this, to do like this, and it's very natural way of embodying previous generation trauma.
Thank you. Yeah, right. Those things that you hold for certain, but nobody really said that, or not really as in like, this is the truth, and they leave those truths live in us as sometimes, like you read that somewhere, right? Like that's a real thing. That's very true. Thank you. Ron?
Oh, I want to follow Vila with this reference to a sense of scarcity or too much or something, you know, how to behave around managing ourselves, or like compensating for something that has happened but not to us. And it can show up in the way we witness ourselves. Oh, I'm doing great, or I've got to do more, or this will never be enough. And that can also reflect in the way we might have an inner critic that says, oh, you must work much harder to get even beyond everything that we know already, because to get somewhere, you've got to be as good as other people. There's a real history, of course, in racial hierarchy, where people with brown and black bodies have learnt that they don't have dominion over their own bodies. And this is way, way back hundreds of years. And interestingly, that might come from people with white bodies having done all the things they did to other white bodies beforehand. So that's part of maybe their trauma, which then was enacted up before they even went to, say, the African continent. It can show up in loss of motivation. You know, that the body that has been traumatized has kind of shrunk and diminished, and the muscles kind of lose their openness and ability to stretch into what is needed. And so sometimes there's a shutdown, you know, a loss of the ability to step into life fully. I can describe two males in my close family who seem to have drifted through life without being able to do ordinary things, take care of themselves, get a job. And the women are really proactive, very, very commonly, you know, they get the jobs, they serve themselves, they take care of the family, they serve the community. Another possible reaction, way it shows up is overreaction. Some little thing happens and no one else in the room is affected, but me it might be, whoa, you know, how can this be happening? And then the rage. So removing the shutdown response by some layer of healing might open up to the rage of, how are these things even happening? And that rage has been suppressed for generations. So when I feel it, it feels like that it's enormous, and I don't even know why it's that big.
Thank you. Yeah, we really could go on about how they show up in so many ways, right? From our personal lives and from something that I do myself, like Ron was mentioning, just my overreaction, that nobody else in the room reacts that way, but I do. And I was also thinking collective-wise, there are some things that are also like so embedded in the culture that we don't even see them as a part of a trauma response, right? I see that a lot here in Mexico. And it goes both ways, right? We are very known for like this laid back, chill, very relaxed, and we go with the flow. And this allows for people to be late because we have this expression like, it's just 5 minutes, it's just 15 minutes, right? And we fail to see how this also hinders us, right? Because also we have a lack culturally, a lack of being able to, this is important and we need to react, right? And that's also part of why the country has the conditions that it does in many senses, economical and social. And it helps you and it also hinders you. And until we make this, we bring awareness to this, we can actually use also the good side, right, of those aspects. Yeah, Nir, go ahead.
Can I add something?
Yes, yeah.
I want to say that it's not only solving the difficulties, there is lots of strength, there is lots of power, there's lots of support in being in touch with our ancestors, lots of gifts. And sometimes the signs are that we lack the gifts, we lack what we need in order to go forward in life, like Ron said. Or we find ourselves repeating the same dynamics with people, even though we don't want them anymore. And it's not only because of our childhood issues, it's also because these are the dynamics which are safe in our family or in our culture. And in order to change what feels safe, we need to go to what was not safe before.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to also speak on that. We have 2 points that I love that Nir brought up. Definitely the one about the strengths. I would love to end with this uplifting tone, so we can address that in a bit. Also, I would love to touch upon what Nir mentioned. When we recognize those patterns that belong to our families or to a pattern in the past, it's not sometimes, and I say to people, if you're lucky enough to just go ahead and, oh, I'm aware of that and I can change it, go ahead and enjoy that. But sometimes the ride is not as simple. And sometimes that ride, we find that some parts of the system will not be as friendly to our change. And we have to bottle up or like pack with us within our resources, being able to deal with stuff like guilt, right?